Welcome back to 4th grade Math Corner. This video is going to go over Module 6, Lesson 13. The learning target for that lesson is today I will add decimals by converting to fraction form. We have spent several days of our fraction unit learning how to add fractions. One thing that we always have to make sure is that in fractions, we add when the denominator is the same. If the denominator is not the same, we have to make them equivalent denominators or the same denominators. So on your homework, you will have problems that are like this. It says, number 1, solve. Convert tenths to hundredths before finding the sum. Rewrite the complete number sentence in decimal form. So problems 1A and 1B are partially completed for you. So those are these two. I will show you what they mean by it's already completed for you. So this would be the actual problem, 2 tenths plus 3 hundredths, and they would like you to solve that. In order to solve it, you must turn your tenths and hundredths into equivalent numbers, or the same numbers. So you can see here that they had 2 and 1/10 turned into hundredths. Remember, we learned to do this by going 1/10 into hundredths. We can ignore the 2 because that's a whole number. We need to know how to get 10 to be 100. We've learned that 10 times 10 is 100, so we just do the same to the top. So that's 7, that's not a 7, that's a 1. 1 times 10 is 10. This is how they got 2 and 10 hundredths. So we would add 2 and 10 hundredths plus 3 hundredths. I already know that we have 2 wholes and 10 hundredths, and I want to add 3 hundredths. The denominator is going to stay hundredths. It doesn't change. 3 plus 10 is 13, and 2 plus nothing, the 2 here and plus nothing is 2. So the answer would be 2 and 13 hundredths. If you don't like to do it vertically, you could also do it horizontally. 2 and 10 hundredths plus 3 hundredths. We know that 10 plus 3 is 13 hundredths. So then you just bring the 2 over, 2 and 13 hundredths. We can rewrite this as, 2 and 13 hundredths. We can rewrite this as a decimal here by going 2 and 1/10 plus 3 hundredths, and this is not part of the lesson, but we already talked about in our homeroom class that we have to line up the place values, and since this decimal point separates the wholes from the parts, we know that these are ones. The decimal point has to line up. These are tenths and hundredths. If there's no hundredths, we just use a 0 as a placeholder. You can add them. 0 plus 3 is 3. 1 plus nothing is 1. Bring down our decimal point to separate these fractions or parts from these wholes. 2 plus 0 is 2. So our answer would be 2 and 13 hundredths. On number 2, the fraction part was done for us. So we have 2 and 1/10 plus 5 and 3 hundredths. They turned the 2 and 1/10 into 2 and 10 hundredths, just as we did over here. They just times the 1/10 by 10 on the bottom and the top, and they got 10 hundredths. So now, when we add them, we have to make sure we line up the places. So I like to do it vertically. I would go 2 and 10 hundredths plus 5 and 3 hundredths. I add my 10 plus my 3, and that makes 13, and they are hundredths, so I must put my denominator. And now I come to the ones place. 2 plus 5 is 7. I could have done it horizontally by going 2 and 10 hundredths plus 5 and 3 hundredths. I would have added my fraction pieces and got 13 hundredths, and then my whole numbers and got 7, and then my answer would still be 7 and 13 hundredths. To write this in decimal form, I would say 2 and 1/10 plus 5 and 3 hundredths equals 7 and 13 hundredths. You will have problems that look like this as well. These are just not done for you. You will have to solve, then write the complete number sentence in decimal form. So you can solve in fraction form. You can say 6 and 9/10. I would take my 9/10 and need to turn them into hundredths. So 10 times 10 is 100. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 9 times 10 is 90. So this would be 6 and 90 hundredths plus 1 and 10 hundredths. If I take my 6 and 90 hundredths and I add 1 and 10 hundredths, I want to put the fraction pieces together. That would be 100 hundredths, because 90 plus 10 is 100. I know that 100 100ths, since it's the same on the top and the bottom, equals 1. So I'm going to regroup it over here. Now I have no hundredths, because there was none left over after I regrouped them. 1 plus 6 is 7, plus 1 is 8. So the answer would actually just be 8. I could write this in decimal form by going 6 and 9/10 plus 1 and 10 hundredths equals 8. And I could check my work by lining up my place value. So I would go 6 and 9/10 plus 1 and 10 hundredths. Since there's nothing here in the hundredths place, I'm going to put a 0 just to hold its place. 0 plus 0 is 0. 9 plus 1 is 10. So I have 0 and regroup my 1. I bring down my decimal point to separate my wholes from my parts. I add 1 plus 6 is 7, and 7 plus 1 is 8. My answer would be 8 and no hundredths, or just 8 wholes. You will do the same for all of the problems on number 2. You will also have the back of your page will have number 3, which is solve by rewriting the number sentence in fraction form. After solving, rewrite the complete number sentence in decimal form. So just like our learning target said, we are converting our decimals to fractions in order to add them, since we've been practicing that a lot. So we are going to rewrite these numbers in fraction form. So 6 and 4/10 plus 5 and 3/10. Notice they are both tenths, so I don't have to change the fractions. I'm just going to add them together. 4 plus 3 is 7, and they are tenths. I'm going to add my whole numbers. 6 plus 5 is 11, so this would equal 11 and 7/10. If I wanted to add decimals, I line up my places. Make sure my tenths are with my tenths, my ones are with my ones. 4 plus 3 is 7. Separate. 6 plus 5 is 11. I have 11 and 7/10. You will do the same for all of the problems that look like this. Notice this has hundredths now, so I have to write 6 and 62 hundredths plus 2 and 98 hundredths. I need to add my fractions first, so I'm going to go 62 hundredths plus 98 hundredths. I'm going to do my math down here. 62 plus 98, 8 plus 2 is 10. That means I need to put the 0 and regroup my 1. 9 plus 1 is 10, plus 6 is 16. That would be 160. and they are hundredths. Notice my top is too big. It's bigger than the bottom, so it is improper. When a fraction is improper, we have to turn it into a mixed number. So I'm going to take out the whole. The whole is 100 hundredths. I'm going to circle it to show that it's a whole. I would have 60 hundredths left. So now I'm going to add my whole numbers, which would be 6 plus 2. 6 plus 2 is 8, but then I have to also add this one whole. So I have to go 8 plus 1 and 60 hundredths, since this was 1 and this is 60 hundredths, which would be 9 and 60 hundredths. This one's a little bit more tricky. If I wanted to check with decimal form, I'm going to line up my places, add 2 plus 8 is 10, 9 plus 1 is 10, plus 6 is 16, regroup, bring down my decimal point. You have to remember to bring down that decimal point. It is what separates your wholes from your parts. 6 plus 1 is 7, plus 2 is 8. No. Oh, I'm sorry. I did not add correctly. 6 plus 1 is 7, plus 2 is 8, 9. 9 and 60 hundredths. It matches my fraction form over here. If you have any questions, please let us know.